Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a woman who sat quietly at her desk for 6 months while her husband and her coworker stole everything she had built and then walked into the boardroom with a file no one knew existed. Pour the coffee, stay close. My husband slept with the woman in the next cubicle. Then she stole my promotion. Then I owned the server. My name is Margaret Hollis. I am 40 years old. I live in a quiet brick house on the west side of Des Moines, and I have been the lead information security analyst at a mid-size insurance company since 2017. On a Tuesday in late October, I came home from a long day, set my keys in the little blue dish by the door, and saw a thank you card on the kitchen counter that was not addressed to me. It was addressed to my husband. The handwriting was loopy and careful, the kind a woman uses when she wants to be remembered. The card smelled faintly of a perfume I had been smelling on his coat for weeks, cedar and something sweet. I did not open it. I did not have to. I already knew the name that was going to be inside, and I already knew which floor of which building she walked into every morning at 8:47 sharp, because I was the woman who had built the badge reader logs that tracked her. I did not cry. I did not call him. I poured a glass of cold water, sat down at the kitchen table, and looked at the card the way you look at a small animal that has wandered into your yard. Calm, curious, already deciding. If your gut already tells you what is coming, tell me in the comments. I want to see how many of us saw it from a mile away. I grew up in a town called Bellwood, about 90 miles north of Des Moines, in a 2-story house with white siding and a porch light my father left on every night until he died. My mother was a school secretary. My father sold farm equipment. They were the kind of people who paid their taxes early and went to the same diner every Sunday after church, and they raised me to believe that work was a kind of prayer. You did it well, you did it quietly. You did not ask for credit, because credit was for people who needed to be told they were good. I was an only child. I was the girl who read the manual before she opened the box. I had a corkboard in my bedroom where I pinned every report card from 4th grade through 12th, and my father once stood in the doorway, looked at it and said, "That is a nice habit, Maggie. Just do not ever expect the world to keep its own corkboard for you." I did not understand what he meant until I was 38 years old. I met Daniel Hollis my junior year at a state college outside Ames. He was tall, soft-spoken, the kind of man who held doors open without making a show of it. He was studying business. I was studying computer science because a high school teacher named Mrs. Avery had pulled me aside in 1999 and told me I had a brain that liked locked rooms. We got married in a small Methodist church in Bellwood in 2008. My father walked me down the aisle in a navy suit that was already a little too big on him. He died the following March. The porch light went off for good. By 2017, Daniel and I had been married 9 years. No children. We had tried. We had stopped trying. I had taken the security lead job at a company I will call The Firm, because the name does not matter, and the lawyers would prefer I not say it. The firm sold long-term care policies to people who were starting to worry about their parents. It had about 400 employees, 2 floors of a glass building off Grand Avenue, and a server room in the basement that was, technically, mine. I had built the access logging infrastructure myself in 2018. Every badge tap, every file pull from the shared drive, every login to the customer database, every after-hours VPN session, all of it written to an audit trail that lived on a hardened server in a locked cage behind a door only 3 people in the company could open. I was one of those 3. The chief compliance officer was another. The third was a man named Roger Klein, who had retired in 2021 and forgotten his own password by Christmas. My husband worked at the same firm. He had since 2015. He was a regional sales manager, 2 floors up from me, in a department where the carpet was newer and the coffee was better. We did not eat lunch together. That had been my idea. I had told him on his first day, "You do your work, I will do mine. and we will be glad to see each other at 6. He had laughed and agreed. For 7 years it had worked. We were the quiet couple at the company picnic. We were the couple HR pointed to when new hires asked whether it was awkward to be married to someone in the same building. It was not awkward. It was easy. That should have been my first warning. Easy is not a word that survives close inspection. In April of last year, a new woman started in sales. Her name was Brittany Vance. She was 32, blonde, recently divorced, and she had the kind of laugh that carried across an open floor plan. She introduced herself to me in the break room on her second day, leaned a hip against the counter, and said, "Oh my God, you are Daniel's wife. He talks about you all the time." I smiled and said something polite about being glad she had joined, and I went back to my desk, and I did not think about her again for almost 6 weeks. That was my second warning. I did not hear it either. By June, Daniel was working late twice a week. By July, 3 times. He said the firm was pushing a new product line, and the regional managers were being told to mentor the new hires. He said Brittany was struggling with the actuarial side, and he had been assigned to help her catch up. He said it the way you say something you have rehearsed in the car. In August, a 30-page draft of my third quarter sales support report disappeared from a folder I had not touched in 2 days. I noticed, because I notice everything. I checked the version history. The last person to open it before me was Brittany Vance from a workstation on the 4th floor at 6:42 in the evening on a Thursday. I had been at my mother's house in Bellwood, helping her sort through my father's old tools. I sat with that for a minute. Then I told myself there was probably a reason. Then I opened the audit log and started watching. By the second week of August, the antagonists had gone quiet at home in a way that felt almost cheerful. Daniel started making dinner on Wednesdays. He brought me a small bouquet of grocery store daisies on a Tuesday for no reason. He told me one night, looking at the ceiling, that the firm was about to open a new senior analyst position on the sales operations side, a role that would sit between sales and security, and that he had heard my name come up in a meeting. He said it the way you tell a child that the tooth fairy might visit if she is good. I thanked him. I went to bed. I lay awake until almost 2 in the morning and watched the headlights from the street move across the bedroom ceiling. 2 days later, the head of human resources sent a calendar invite to me, to Daniel, and to Brittany. The subject line said, "Friendly chat about Q4 opportunities." I knew before I clicked accept. I knew the way a woman knows when her own house has been entered. The meeting was on a Friday at 2:14 in the afternoon. I remember the time because the clock in the small conference room had a loud second hand that I could hear under everything else. The room smelled like the cheap citrus polish the cleaning crew used on the conference table. Brittany wore a cream blouse and the navy blazer that still had a fold line down the back, like she had taken it out of a bag that morning. Daniel wore the tie I had given him for his 38th birthday. I had $9 in cash in the pocket of my jacket, a leftover from lunch the day before. I do not know why I remember that. I just do. The head of HR was a woman named Karen Whitfield. She had been at the firm 26 years, and she had a way of folding her hands on the table that made you feel like you were already in trouble. She told me that the senior analyst position was being filled internally, effective the following Monday, and that the firm had decided to promote Brittany Vance into the role. She said it slowly, the way you tell someone there has been an accident. She said Brittany had submitted, and these are the exact words, a remarkably comprehensive portfolio of quarterly sales analysis that demonstrated a strong grasp of cross-functional security awareness. She said the leadership team had been impressed by the depth of the documentation. She said my own work had been, and I quote, valued, but lateral. Brittany looked at the table. Daniel looked at Brittany. I looked at the clock. 2:14, 2:15. Karen slid a printed copy of the portfolio across the table. I knew it before I touched it. The cover sheet was a template I had built in 2019. The footer on every page had a small 4-digit code in the bottom right corner that I had embedded as a watermark 18 months earlier, after a different report had walked out of the building inside someone's email. The code was a hash. It told me to the minute which workstation had last pulled that file. I did not need to check. I already had. 42 of my draft reports, going back 6 months, had been opened from Brittany Vance's badge, from her workstation, almost all of them between 6 and 9 in the evening, on nights my husband had told me he was mentoring her. For one strange, slow second, I felt something almost like relief. The not knowing was over. The shape of the thing was finally visible. And then the gut punch landed, because Karen said the next sentence with a kind smile, like she was doing me a favour. She said, "Margaret, we want you to know that Daniel personally vouched for Brittany's work in the leadership review, and we thought that was a lovely example of cross-departmental support." She said the word lovely. I want you to hear that. Lovely. I sat very still. I did not cry. I did not fight. I said, "Of course, and thank you for telling me directly." I gathered the printed portfolio. I stood up. I walked out of the conference room. And I went down 2 flights of stairs to the basement, to the server cage. And I put my hand flat on the cool metal door for a long moment, because it was the only thing in that building that had never lied to me. A real teacher of mine, years ago, had told me that the worst people in your life will always hand you the rope, and your only job is to decide whether to hang yourself with it or weave it into something they cannot cut. I stood in that basement hallway, and I decided. The rescue, when it came, did not look like a rescue. It looked like a woman named Eleanor Reyes, the chief compliance officer, walking past the server cage on her way back from the vending machine at 4 in the afternoon, holding a small bag of pretzels and saying, "Margaret, honey, are you all right? You look like you have seen something." I almost said no. I almost smiled and said I was fine, because that is what I had been trained to say since I was 9 years old in a kitchen in Bellwood. But Eleanor stopped walking. She set the pretzels down on a shelf. She asked one more question, and it was the question that broke me open. She said, "Do you need help, or do you need a witness?" Nobody had ever offered me the second one before. I told her, in the hallway, in less than 4 minutes, exactly what I had found. I told her about the 42 draft reports. I told her about the badge logs. I told her about the timestamps that matched the nights my husband had told me he was working late. I did not cry. Eleanor listened without moving. When I was done, she said, "Walk with me." We went to her office. She closed the door. She told me, in a voice that was not warm, but was steady, that she had been at the firm for 19 years, that she had watched 3 different sales managers try to slide things past the security team, and that she had been waiting, in a way she could not fully explain, for someone to walk in with proof instead of a feeling. She said the promotion announcement was scheduled for the following Monday at 9 in the morning, all hands email, company-wide. She said, "Can you export the audit trail by Sunday night? Clean, signed, time-stamped, with the hash chain intact." I told her I could have it ready by Saturday. She did not say, "You poor thing." She did not say, "Your husband is awful." She said, "Bring me the file, Margaret, and I will do the rest." The antagonists, when they were finally cornered, did not deny what they had done. Brittany cried and said she had only been trying to grow into the role. Daniel told Eleanor, in a separate meeting I was not in, that he had been trying to help his wife by giving her career a push, and that the firm would benefit from a little fresh energy in the sales operations seat. He used the word energy. He used the word resilience. He said something about real-world performance. None of them said the word stolen. None of them said the word lied. If you have ever had someone turn cruelty into a vocabulary lesson, Drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know I am not alone in this. I did not move out the night I found the card. I waited 11 days. I needed those 11 days. I exported the badge logs to an encrypted drive. I pulled the version history of every one of the 42 reports. I printed the hash chain and signed it under our internal evidence protocol. I put all of it into a plain manila folder, the kind we used to keep on the supply room shelf, and I labelled it with a single date in black pen, October 23rd. The day Karen Whitfield said the word lovely. Then I moved out. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the east side of the river, 2 blocks from a bakery that started its ovens at 5 in the morning. The smell of warm bread came through my kitchen window every day at 6. My new landlord was a retired schoolteacher named Joyce Bender, who knocked on my door 3 days after I moved in with a casserole dish covered in foil and a note that said, "No questions, just eat." I cried over that casserole for 20 minutes. It was the first time I had cried since the meeting. I changed almost nothing about my outside life and almost everything about my inside one. I kept my job. I kept my last name, for now, because my name was on the audit logs, and I wanted every signature on every page to match. I adopted a senior dog from the shelter on Fleur Drive, a grey-muzzled beagle mix named Walter, who slept on a folded blanket at the foot of my bed and snored like a small motorboat. I started taking a Saturday morning watercolour class at the community centre, taught by a soft-spoken man named Henry Park, who never once asked me what I did for a living. He brought me a small, unopened sketchbook on my 4th Saturday and set it on my desk without a word. I learned how to be alone in a way that did not feel like punishment. I learned that fresh sheets on Sunday afternoons can rebuild a nervous system. I learned that the woman my father had been raising, the one with the corkboard and the quiet hands, had never been weak. She had been waiting. There is a difference. Sunday night, the night before the promotion announcement, I sat at my new kitchen table with the manila folder in front of me. Walter was at my feet. The bakery downstairs was already running its first ovens for the morning. I opened the folder one more time. I looked at the 42 file names. I looked at the badge timestamps. I looked at the watermark codes. I closed the folder. I put on my coat. I drove to the office at 11 at night, badged into the building, badged into the server cage, ran one final clean export, signed it, sealed it, and walked it upstairs to Eleanor Reese's office, where she was waiting for me with the door open and a fresh pot of coffee on the credenza. She did not say thank you. She said, "Sit down, Margaret. You have done the hard part. Let me do mine." Monday morning, the promotion email did not go out at 9. At 8:47, the time Brittany Vance had been badging in every weekday since April, she was met in the lobby by Eleanor, by Karen Whitfield, and by a man from the firm's outside counsel whose name I did not know. They walked her into a small conference room on the 2nd floor. The blinds were closed. At 9 to 12, Daniel was walked into a second conference room, 2 doors down. The blinds on that one were closed too. I was not in either room. I was at my own desk on the 1st floor, with my hands flat on the keyboard and a cup of black coffee cooling next to my mouse. At 10:04, Eleanor walked out of the second conference room, came down to my floor, stopped in front of my desk, and said one sentence, low enough that no one else could hear. She said, "The firm has accepted both resignations, effective immediately, and the audit trail will be preserved for any external inquiry." Then she put a hand briefly on my shoulder, the way a mother might, and walked away. I went into the small interior conference room behind my desk at 10:30 that morning, the one with the loud second hand on the clock. Brittany Vance was already in there, alone, waiting for an escort to walk her out. Her eyes were red. The cream blouse from August was gone. She was wearing a grey sweater. She looked up at me when I closed the door, and she opened her mouth to say something, and I did not let her. I sat down across from her. I set the manila folder on the table between us. I did not open it. I said, Brittany, in August, you took 42 of my draft reports off the shared drive between 6 and 9 in the evening, on the same nights my husband told me he was helping you with the actuarial side. I said, you submitted those reports to Karen Whitfield with your name on the cover, and Karen used the word lovely in a conference room at 2:14 in the afternoon on a Friday. I said, you did not earn that promotion. You photocopied it. She started to cry. I let her. I said, the audit trail is signed, hashed, and timestamped. It is in the hands of compliance and outside counsel. I said, you will not work in this industry in this city again. And that is not a threat. That is a footnote. I said, the next time you decide that another woman's quiet means she is not paying attention, I want you to remember the word lovely. I want you to remember it the way I am going to remember it for the rest of my life. Then I picked up the folder, I stood up, I opened the door, I walked out. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. Tell me in the comments what part of the story stayed with you the most. I drove home that night the long way, past the brick house I no longer lived in, past the porch light I no longer turned on, and across the river to the small apartment above the bakery. Walter was at the window. The kitchen smelled like warm bread. I sat down at the kitchen table, in the same chair I had been sitting in the night the thank you card arrived, and I spoke out loud, quietly, to the 9-year-old girl in the upstairs bedroom in Bellwood, with the corkboard on her wall. I told her, sweetheart, you were never the quiet one because you had nothing to say. You were the quiet one because you were listening. And listening is a kind of building. And one day, you are going to build a room that no one can lie inside. I told her, being unwanted by people who would lie to your face is not the same as being unworthy of love. It is closer to evidence. It is closer to proof. I turned off the kitchen light. The bakery ovens were starting their second round downstairs. Walter sighed in his sleep. The porch light in Bellwood had been off for 17 years, and for the first time since my father died, I did not feel like I was the one who had to keep it lit.